She did look. See, told you, Magazzo girl. 8:22. Good morning. It's the link. Yes, we're gonna go right to the Zoom room. We're standing by. I don't know if your ears are burning, John, but we're talking about the public school openings a few minutes ago. We have Superintendent of the Guam Department of Education, Jon Fernandez. Good morning, John.
Afternoon, Chris, and afternoon, Sabrina.
Hi.
You guys be careful coming into GDOE headquarters because the superintendent's in the middle of the parking lot right now.
Counting color.
Nice background. Soup, I guess just first, we got the big decision from the board. You want to just unpack that for our viewers and our listeners?
Yeah, we, the board had a discussion yesterday, and I guess, I believe, they were, as we head into this final week and before the start of the school year, I think there's, a recognition and acknowledgement of anxiety amongst everybody in our stakeholder community. Looking at the positivity reports coming out over the last week, obviously the FD situation occurred and the shutdown of FD school for a few days. The governor also disclosing her own personal situation, and so I think the board wanted to discuss the possibility of I guess the possibility of delaying the school year for a week. And, there was a long discussion. There was a special meeting that was really meant to just check in on the readiness of our school system based on the plans that we had put together. But it did turn into a longer debate that I think reflects, a lot of concerns that the community will continue to have so long as we're in this COVID-19 environment. And so at the end of the day, there was a motion made. 5 of the board members voted in opposition to that motion. So the motion to delay the school year did not pass, and the start of the school year remains August 17th. Now that doesn't mean that there is no longer an opportunity to respond to any emergency situations or severe change in the public health environment. It means that decision is going to be left to the superintendent, based on the day-to-day situations that occur. And so, that was a debate last night. I think it was reflective of a lot of what we can anticipate to be anxiety, uncertainty going into the school year. I don't think a week delay would have really alleviated those concerns. But we were there with the board members. It was a healthy debate. We heard from all sides. And also the Guam Federation of Teachers, President Tim Fidenko was there at the board meeting, and his recommendation was to move forward. So, with all the stakeholders in the room, at least on the board the decision again was to go ahead and start as planned and empower the superintendent to make the day-to-day decisions should a situation arise involving COVID-19 on our campuses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I just wanted to follow up on the story that we ran. Because it said that a written protocol is rolling out in the coming days in the event that there's a positive case. So we don't have anything written out or any kind of protocol currently in place?
No, there are. I guess what I wanted to say was that a clearer protocol, and I hope one that's more parent friendly, will be able to be sent out hopefully today. Between the public health and GDOE. So I think you're well aware that in the past, as we've been approached about COVID-19, our standard response has been, we're going to work with public health as we would with any infectious disease for which there is already an existing protocol. And so, for instance, in a TB situation, should there be a TB case involving one of our employees or students, public health would be the first to get that information. They will immediately notify us formally, and then our nurses will mobilize and our social workers will mobilize to assist public health in the contact tracing. And that's a pretty standard protocol, except we're just going to have to modify it for COVID-19, including a much quicker timeline to really notify everybody and to move forward. So I think, as we've said to the public that, we work closely with public health. I think we also realize that, this is a new situation and people kind of want to know what goes on behind the scenes. After you're notified, what exactly is happening? How long is it going to take? What steps are you going to take? And so I wanted to be a little clearer and ask public health for their assistance, and being a little clearer to parents and to teachers and so forth as to what to expect when we notify the community that there is a potential COVID-19 exposure. What we wanted to also state is that it's not simply, there's an exposure, therefore full shutdown of the facility.
Right.
We know that exposures are going to happen and could happen in many, many different ways. It could involve a maintenance worker who goes on campus, goes right to, fixing a generator or something, and then, just checks in at the office and then moves on without any contact with any employees except in that main office. You could have a parent come in and meet with the assistant principal for 30 minutes and then leave. And, or you could have multiple students from a household coming in, right? I mean, there's different situations that we have to deal with, and not all of them, based on my conversation with public health, would be an automatic school shutdown. It really depends on the extent of the exposure and the mitigating efforts to clean the facility, perhaps, or to quarantine people due to, as a precaution. And we can see that happening. And I think we just want the public to know that in every situation, that there was an immediate communication between our agencies and strong support for both of our efforts, and that we will notify our public as soon as we know the information. So I think that's what I meant. It's just something that parents can understand and which is going on behind the scenes versus just saying that we're working with public health.
Right. John, we had Lillian Posadas from the Guam Memorial Hospital on in the 7 o'clock hour, and she had some pretty strong words about the reopening of schools, and it basically said that it's going to serve as a grounds for transmission. And later we asked her again to speak on it, and she kind of dialed it down and said you guys did the measures, but this is something I'm sure that you've been hearing, not just in the days leading up to that special board meeting, but maybe even in the hours after it.
We've had that same conversation with many, in this particular situation, and I'm not talking about DOE, but just in general, COVID-19, I think so many people have been bombarded with a lot of information from a lot of sources. In fact, many of us might, in some conversations, consider ourselves experts, having gone through Google and Facebook for the latest and greatest information. I honestly sat down with my team and said, look, let's look at the information, let's evaluate the information, let's determine whether we need to consider a separate type of public health framework for the opening of schools, because right now we're relying on public health, we're relying on our medical experts, our doctors, on the governor's office for that direction as to when we should be considering the opening of schools. And we relied on the PCOR 2 to PCOR 3 shift to give us that direction. And if there's anybody who doesn't feel that we should go in that route, that we need to figure out what we're going to do. None of my team wanted to put themselves in the shoes of our medical experts. And so I think the message was, we need to communicate our concerns, stay in close contact with public health, and to the extent that they are giving us an assurance that we are in a situation where we can open schools, then let's do our best to follow the CDC guidelines and the safety parameters to make it happen. And I think the plan that we put in place, does that. So I think a couple of things I would say in that regard is, people are coming to me saying, look at all these other states and they're having issues going to school, and I have to distinguish the fact that my understanding with public health is that when we look at our positivity rates, which is about 2% based on our latest 7-day rolling average, that is much different from states like Florida, which is about 17%, looking at Mississippi at 20%.
Right. Yeah, John. But what I think people, when they hear that 17%, Florida, Mississippi, they don't really, because we're living in it here, Right. So yeah, and I think people also have issues with the criteria that we used with the PCOR, because they've changed it a lot. So obviously, and I know that parents are just very, very concerned, especially with the recent positives, right? And just going to what I had heard, that 60-some%,
right, 62%
opted for
opted
so that's
for
what I
distance
wanted to
learning.
say. So
and
number
hard
one,
copy.
I guess when we look at the positive, we're kind of paying attention to the same statistics that the governor says she's looking at, which is that at 3% positivity threshold and stay below that. So of course, as we get closer to that, we're going to get a little bit more, intense in our communications with public health, because that's the threshold we're given to kind of gauge, how we're doing. But on the models of learning, I also wanted to assure the board that, these pictures that we get from other states where you've got the crowded hallways and playgrounds of everybody coming back to school with no mask, that's not the situation we're planning for. So when we offered our parents the opportunities to choose their learning, I want the parents to really understand that it is their choice whether to send their child to school or not. We offer two options of 100% at-home learning, and about 62% of our parents and students have taken us up on that offer. So 62% of our kids are going to be 100% at home, either online or using hard copy lessons that'll be distributed by the schools to be taken home, to be given lessons, and to maintain contact with the teacher by phone or other means. So that's kind of the process. So that leaves us with about 38% who are going to school. And those 38% are not going to school on the same day. They're actually divided into three groups. So on any one day, and I think the average is about only 16% of a school's enrollment is actually going to be in class. So to give our parents an idea of what that means, as I checked in with some of our elementary schools, our large and our small elementary schools, we're really talking about, in an average classroom, about 7 to 8 students would be the norm. And that's in our elementary schools. As we get to high school, what we're hearing from some of the high schools is some of those classes are going to be 5 students, in a classroom face-to-face, because 70% of our high schoolers are going, at home. So I just want to make sure that's the, people have a better picture of what's going on in the classroom. It's not going to be 24 students trying to stay away from each other. You're going to have 5, 7, 8 students spaced apart, and hopefully more opportunity for our teachers and staff to supervise them and reinforce those safety measures and practices.
Right. I mean, it's almost 1-to-1 for everybody.
And speaking of 1-to-1, where are we with addressing the needs of special needs students?
So, we are hearing from our special needs parents as they work with their schools to revisit their plans for their students. So again, as we've reiterated to our students and our parents, all of that comes down to the individualized education plan that you set for that student during the course of this year. And so we know that some students are still not wanting to come to school, and we have to, we are saying that we're not able to provide one-to-one aids at home. But if you're at school, we know that some students are requesting multiple days. In fact, we have several students who want to come every single day of the week. And so the schools are really empowered to make that determination as part of the IEP process, and whatever they agree upon, we will go and enforce as part of the services provided. So that's really what's being done on a case-by-case basis. So students who normally would be required to go into one of the 3 cohorts actually could go to school every day under their IEP requirements.
John, we talk about the choice for the teachers, the parents, right? So with this surge, rise in positives, our teachers, again, and I've asked this a bunch of times, but it's just because I keep hearing that they are concerned about, not being able to have an option that the parents have about teaching face-to-face or online. If teachers have that concern, they take it to their administrator. Is that how it works? And what if they're in a school that has a high face-to-face enrollment?
Right. So typically, what happens, what's happening now, but typically what happens in the course of normal activities is that teachers are encouraged to seek the whatever accommodation that they require or desire, based on their personal situation, and the administrator is authorized to be able to to see how that can be accommodated within the context of their school, the numbers of kids who are opting to come in versus not, and so forth. And we know that those requests have been made to the school administrators, and we're allowing the school administrators to determine how they want to address that. Again, based on the students who are coming in, should they not be satisfied, and we've had a couple of instances, they obviously would elevate that to our deputy superintendent to resolve to see if there's any possible resolution. We haven't seen too many of those rise to the deputy level. I think we're still in the organizing phase, But yes, we're working to see what we can do in this unusual circumstance.
What about
Go ahead.
busing?
Yeah, so busing, we're working with, we had several meetings yesterday with Vince Ariola and Jess Garcia and the team over there at the DPW. So, I think, there's certain things that we can plan for, and there's certain things that we're going to have to see how it goes on the first week of school. So we tried to make it as easy as possible on the DOE side by leaving the schedules the same, not changing any attendance areas, so that DPW could maintain the same schedule, the same stops, and so forth. So we want the parents to know, and we will be putting out more information of DPW, that last year's schedule, last year's time and pickup times and drop-off times and stops remain the same. And then what we're going to do is monitor the numbers that come in. But again, what we're talking about is, as we did the numbers, we looked at the expected daily attendance. We assumed that 100% of those daily attendance numbers would ride the bus, and we divided those numbers by the maximum capacity of the bus and the bus system, and it was determined that there should be enough buses, in that mid-90 range to service all the students who are wanting to go on a day-to-day basis to school. Now, we don't expect all of those students to ride the bus, but for planning purposes, we made that assumption, and DPW still was able to say that they thought they could meet that demand. We think that many students were going to continue to do what they normally do, whether it was walk to school. We think there might be a higher number of parents dropping their kids at school if they do have transportation, simply because we're in COVID-19 and there might be that anxiety about riding the bus. On the buses, there will be hand sanitizer, face masks will be required, and then there will be an alternating seating pattern to encourage physical distancing while they are on the bus. I believe 24 passengers is the maximum capacity for each bus.
Mm-hmm. For the 38% that chose face-to-face learning option, are they mainly elementary, middle, high school?
Yeah, so for elementary, the divide was about 40% for face-to-face, and it was and 60% either at home. And when you get up to high school, that number drops to about 31% face-to-face, and then online and hard copy is going to be 69%. So the number was higher in elementary than it is in high school. However, I will say that, of course, as we led up to the start of the school year, we've been very flexible in letting parents change their model of learning, even after even after we hit the deadline. And so we are seeing some of the numbers move up towards staying at home, based on last week's numbers. And we're still trying to accommodate, those requests.
Mm-hmm. So what if we continue to see more and more cases, positive cases? Because yesterday it was 16. If we keep seeing this climb in cases, do you foresee maybe pushing back the school year, or just moving towards all distance learning and hard copy? Is there like a threshold where you're like, okay, wait a minute, we need to do something here, change our minds? Or
after the board's discussion, I'm going to continue to work with public health and our team to kind of see if there's a special threshold that we ought to be considering regard to the entire district. I think we had already prepared for the possibility of, should a situation happen at a school that requires the kids or teachers to not be at school, or the kids to stay home, we would be moving them into 100% at home, either online or hard copy. So we had already thought through that contingency on a school by school basis. But other than that, we're basically in the same situation as I think the other 15 schools who also have opened. We have about, I would say we have about 15 Catholic schools,
mm-hmm.
St. Paul, St. John's, Harvest, who are already open and running. And I think we're in the same position as they are, ready to open, got all the parameters in place, the PPEs in place, but of course wary about the situation and monitoring it to make sure that we act in the best interest of our students and our employees.
Mm-hmm. And are you guys in need of like school aids or are you guys, is there going to be more school aides on campus because of, the little kids and, the swapping of masks and not, following social distance guidelines?
Yeah. Are you going to have social distancing police?
Well, because of the numbers and the lower numbers, we've maintained the same staffing levels,
Right.
So you
and
have more
so
than enough.
that's going to help us with the supervision. I think that's really one of the more the assurances that we were trying to provide is that by ensuring that we have really low numbers at school, that will give us an opportunity to evaluate, enforce, and reinforce the safety practices, the hand washing practices. I know Chris is going to come out and give hand washing
Seminars.
lessons to our kids, but also look at the way we allow them to interact when they're not in class. So all of those I think are more doable under the situation we have now, when we only have about 16% of our kids on campus at any one day. So that's what we considered phase one, and then we'll see how phase one goes, and whether the public health context would allow us to expand that number on campus, or will force us to either stay the same or change course.
Mm-hmm.
So again, that's something that we're kind of all in the same boat
Right.
with us, the charter schools and the private schools, trying to read the tea leaves on the public health situation.
Yeah.
But I want to say that Art St. Augustine and before him, Linda DeNorsi, have always been good in really lending the expertise in the department to our decision making, and especially over this last week, what the Lieutenant Governor indicated is that they would be standing up the Emergency Operating Center for the first weeks of school to ensure that there is a smooth coordination and collaboration with all agencies relative to school opening. I think that's a sign of support for trying to make sure that we do our best in the reopening efforts of our school system.
Mm-hmm. Say 2 months in, for the parents that opted for distance learning, can they change their mind if they see a drop in cases? Can they say, okay, now I feel comfortable now, I want to put my child in face-to-face?
Or maybe even the reverse, where they're face-to-face and they're like, oh, no, I want to do online now.
Yeah, once we get into the school year, it's going to be more difficult from a scheduling and tracking situation to do that. So the decision probably won't be, the changing of the models will probably be reserved for the end of quarter, to allow for a grading period to take place and so forth. But again, if the situation from a public health standpoint gets intense enough that we need to address, the schools or the entire district, we'll make that decision, for everybody, and try to adjust from there.
John, are you guys going to release maybe info on? So we have 62% of the people opting just for total 100% stay at home. Are there any schools that have zero face-to-face enrollment, or are you able to? Are you guys going to come out with kind of a breakdown of like which school is this and that? And
we have that breakdown for now. It would help us to have our first week of school as well, because what we did, we had about maybe 22,000, 23,000 respondents to our registration. That leaves about 5,000 students perhaps who have not responded. What we did for planning purposes was group them into the face-to-face, so we can understand the breadth and potential numbers at the schools or the buses. But we're going to have to wait till that first week to really work with them to clarify that situation. That's one of the uncertain moving parts, and one of the concerns that I have, because there do seem to be a pocket of households out there that have been where there's been no communication with the school. And we push the schools on their numbers, on their response numbers, and saying, look, you guys are so low. What are you doing to get to those parents? And they're saying that a lot of times they're getting wrong contact information. The numbers, the phone numbers that they had, are no longer working. The minutes might have expired. Some of them are finding it's easier to communicate with the parents on social media because none of the other traditional communications methods are working. So they're, that's one of the situations, because if they're disconnected from their school community, just in terms of the regular communications, my guess is that they're disconnected in many other ways with what's going on in the broader community. And it'll be good for us to get a handle on that, and to make sure that we understand, what's going on for those households, so we can ensure that they are taking the appropriate measures and we can, assist as needed.
John, I understand you have some issues with the budget process that's ongoing. Did you care to share those concerns if you have them?
Well, we had a meeting with Senator San Augustine, our appropriations chair, before the budget was released. And, I think at that time we were looking at an $11 to $12 million cut. I think it's probably around 10 million now is what I heard when I spoke to him last night. But, I think the one thing we'll say is that we anticipated there would be difficulty for the entire island based on COVID-19 and based on our projections for next year. And of course, we're not the experts in the revenue projections, so we'll allow them to have that battle. But, we cut $19 million over the last 3 years, and asking to cut, basically to a total of $30 million when you add those numbers back for next year, that's a lot to absorb. And so this week we'll be sitting down with a team to go through what those cuts will mean. But when we did this exercise multiple times over the last few years, you're now starting to cut into the substitutes and the other the
meat and the bone, right? The meat and the bone of you guys' operation.
Because ultimately our budget covers personnel costs, utilities, and some of your essential contracts, and beyond that, we rely on our federal funds to kind of help support our curricular, activities and so forth. So we're gonna, we've been working on our reopening, but we are engaging as well in the budget,
right.
And we will continue to have that discussion. One of the things I did do though is I sent a letter to Vice Speaker Nelson and to Senator San Augustine, and I informed them that one of the assurances that had to be provided to U.S. Department of Education in order for us to access the $41.5 million was an assurance that we would be provided a maintenance of effort, which basically is the average of our last 3 years of support from the government. So, I warned him that would be an issue that we would have to address. I notified, the senators, and we will be contacting USDOE to determine how to proceed. There may be opportunities for flexibility or waiver of that requirement, but, at the very least, I need to notify them now. And my concern, of course, is if they come back and say, you can't access this full amount unless you meet the requirements.
So you informed the senators of that. I mean, I just want to inform them that it's an election year. It's an election year. We're in the middle of an election, and I got to say, education first, education first. That's what we hear all the time. Very frustrating. So now you guys got to go back to the federal government and say, hey, maintenance of effort. Our local government might not be putting as much effort into our public school system as we'd like. So can we just still get that 41 million? That's a lot at stake, John. That's
No, it is a lot at stake.
Yeah.
And that's why we've repeated it in our public meetings with the senators, and we sent them another letter to assure them. Sometimes there's this conversation about, well, why don't you use those federal funds and pay for some of the stuff that we can't pay for? And, the federal government's very clear. Education for the most part is a local responsibility. And so when it comes to education funds, there's a real sense that this should be to supplement what the local government is providing. And so, but we'll see. We'll make that notification to USAID and see what they say, and let the senators know what those ramifications are.
I mean, if they say no, you guys you're out $41 million, then you're also going to be dealing with an additional 30 million in cuts. That's insane. Insane.
Right, and that 41 million again, some of that goes to the private schools, the charter schools, and really is investing in our protective equipment, as well as our distance learning supports, trying to purchase new laptops and tablets for our kids. So again, we notified them of that, and we will continue to monitor and notify the feds about that situation.
I wanted to ask about Grab and Go. Is there any discussions about restarting that program? I mean, because you have like 62% students that aren't.
Right after this interview, we'll have a meeting. We're trying to wrap up some details on distribution of meals for students who are not at school. So that includes students who are face-to-face but are on their off days, and it also includes students who are at home 100% of the time. So, we're working with our main contractor, which is Sodexo, to determine how we can distribute food, but in a different way now that we're back into the school year. So one of the ideas that we're looking at right now is to use the Fridays, which are not a school day, under this alternating schedule, to do distribution while the teachers are focusing on their parent and student interventions. We would look at opening up for a couple of hours at every school and being able to distribute bags of non-perishable food items to our families, and that's kind of what we're is on the table right now. I don't know that we'll be able to do a full number of meals once we open the first week of school, but we certainly want to be able to provide the number of meals that they would normally get in a school week, to be able to provide that to them on the Fridays. So once we get those details nailed down and everybody's able to, I don't know that we'll be able to do full, then we can go forward.
And that's separate from the emergency food commodity
Right.
distribution, right?
That's what I'm talking about is really for the students who are enrolled in
So where are you? So you're looking at a Friday, one big distribution of meals for the kids. But what about that emergency food distribution?
That's also being worked on with, remember, we had a conversation about a week ago with the mayors. So what we'd like to do is pilot distribution in multiple sites, using the mayor's either offices or centers in the villages, and try to increase the number of distribution sites with their support to assist in distribution, so we can get that food out in a different way than we were doing over the summer. Over the summer, we were able to manage 2 sites. We had DPW and GPD on site to assist us, and that really was a lot of effort, and we diverted those 2 agencies from their core responsibilities. So what we did is ask the mayors, if those who want to participate, please let us know, and then we can work on the logistics of enabling them to be able to distribute directly from their centers or even directly to the households. What we need, of course, in response is all the accountability documentation that needs to go along with that, provided to us, so we can maintain accountability for the food items.
When do you guys plan on making final decisions on both the grab and go and the emergency food distribution?
I'm hoping that we'll have a better sense of, after this meeting today, of the grab and go situation, so we can, because there might be the potential to have it partially up and running on the first week of school, meaning that I believe that we'll be able to provide breakfast items at least, and then build from there based on the availability of the food items on island. But what we're planning to do, and if we can do that, then we'll basically ramp up from there, and hopefully have things in place by September. On the emergency food, well, hopefully I can get an update this week and work with the mayors on the next distribution of food, but that'll look different from what we've been doing over the summer. So, we'll hopefully try to announce something this week, by the end of the week.
There's a question from one of our viewers on our Facebook Live. Will the staff faculty be tested before the school opens?
We've talked about that, and I've asked the public health officials about that, and the answer is no, and it's nowhere is it required to test. And of course I understand the sentiment behind it. I guess the challenge is that once you test, that doesn't mean that the very next day you don't get exposed and require another test. I mean, it might be good for that one day, but I think the ability to test all your teachers and staff and children, it doesn't seem like a practical way of preventing the spread of the virus in the school system, in the schools. And again, my conversations was, is that going to be an effective way to address these concerns? And again, the response that I've received from our medical folks is that once you do that test, you could go home or go out to a restaurant the next day, right, and contract the virus, and then a few days later test positive. So what are we trying to accomplish? I think that's the big big concern.
Or on the reverse, John, you could go and get tested and be negative, but you're actually positive, and they just didn't test you at the right time. So,
Right. I mean, so it might give a good appearance of of being safe, but it won't improve our ability to assure anybody that those individuals hours later had a different result, would have had a different result.
Where are you guys with the teacher vacancies?
Right. So typically we do, about this time of the year, well, a little bit earlier, we're kind of running around 50 positions that are still need to be filled. And that's kind of where we are right now. We do have a lot of selections and hiring that's already going on and continuing. But in our latest report yesterday, it looked like there were 50 slots that we needed to, kind of focus on. So, we're working on that. I think the schools have to have a plan to cover those situations, and that's what we're waiting for from the schools.
Is that pretty significant? 50.
It's not. It's actually it's about the same that we've seen in every year. But again, I think a couple weeks into the school year, as we get a better handle on how teachers are being accommodated and so forth, it'll give us a sense of how the schools are able to adjust to those teaching shortages in this particular COVID-19 school year. So we've got a lot of, I think we've got a lot of ideas, for instance, out there about, well, if you don't have a teacher, but this is a teacher that can do it online, can they teach multiple classes or multiple classes at different schools to overcome that shortage? So I'm sure that those are the kinds of discussions that we can have in this particular year where we're making these kinds of changes.
Right, but do you plan on hiring them before school starts? And what sort of training? Wouldn't they need to go through training? Because we're dealing with like 3 different formats here.
Right. No, so all summer we've been training, and usually
I'm talking about the new hires, the 50 teachers. Like how long would it take to get them up to speed?
Right. Well, that'll be the challenge. I think that again, every school year we're pushing to fill all these positions. Before the school year, so they can take advantage of the training. And this year we provided an extra week of training to get all the teachers the extra time to prepare. So those who come in the middle of the school year, after the school year has already started, we'll be relying on the school team for the training that we would need and support that they would need to get up to speed.
What about you, John? You have two kids, right? Are they going face to face, or are they going distance learning?
Well, we gave every parent a choice, and so I gave my kids a choice. My high schooler is going online, and I thought that was the case. My boy wavered between face to face and online, but he chose to go online because he found out all his friends are going online. So honestly, with that, I think and I think the kids are going through that as well. I think the high schoolers are wondering if they're going to be able to participate in their school activities if they're not at school. And so that's the concern I'm getting from the high schoolers. And from the middle schoolers, it really is depending on their group of friends. And so, they're all like, what are you doing? And if you're going to go, I'm going to go. And if you're not, I'm not going to go. And I think that's, that age group. So, that goes.
God, John, when are we going to have a pep rally again? Was that just like dead and gone until there's a vaccine? Because I was just thinking, man, high school.
We're going to do our best to abide by all the safety parameters. Yeah. One of my concerns is that I'm looking at all these pictures that you see online and people going to these gatherings and parties. And so, we're worried about the whole situation. At school, though, we're going to do our best. And we're not going to do our best. We're going to enforce the safety parameters and ensure that we're not part of the situation and try not to be part of the spread. So we'll do our best that we can with the guidelines that we have in place.
All right, John. So in closing, you're basically saying that so many students have opted for online that the number of students in the schools is going to be very manageable because it's going to be so low, and that you guys have put into place the precautions, the safety parameters, and that you also have the ability, the flexibility to respond to surges or exposures or anything like that.
Yeah, we prepared the best that we can. I think the situation that we planned out, as we've reviewed it over and over again, puts us in the best position right now to manage any type of face-to-face interaction. Having those very low numbers on campus will assist us in just really getting used to what this new normal will be. It doesn't mean that there won't be an exposure somewhere that'll impact the campus even from outside in the community, but we do have our plans in place to respond quickly should that occur. And we're looking forward to the start of the school year and making these things happen, making these things work.
All right. Thanks a lot, John.
Thank you, John, so much for your time.
Thank you.
Hey, and we'll catch up with you next Wednesday. You have your, first day of school report and all that stuff.
Absolutely. All right.
Okay.
Thanks
Thank
a
you,
lot.
John. God
Take care.
bless you. Wash your hands.
Yeah, you too.
Okay.
Bye.
See you. 9:01. Very interesting.
Yeah.
I find it's kind of interesting. I mean, it is what it is, right? And that's why we have a choice. But going back to when we had the Parent Teacher Student Association member of JFK, Ralph Rivera, and
Yeah.
he went on and he was like, DOE has all the things, the safeties in place. And we're like, hey, what about your kid? He's like, oh, online. So, I mean, that's why you guys have a choice. And I think